Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 21 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and 24/7 on the internet at thestruggle.org. I'm going to start the show by talking about the unemployed. 14.5 million Americans unemployed, with 250,000 more added in September. 6 people looking for work for every job posted. In this great recession, the banks have gotten trillions of dollars in money and guarantees. And working people, well, they've gotten their unemployment benefits extended. Except there's a catch. Not everybody gets it. Take the case of Debbie Kransky of Milwaukee, reported in the New York Times. She was laid off in February from her medical billing position. It's her second layoff in 2 years. Well, so she'll get unemployment, right? No. You see, her last job lasted only a few weeks, and that doesn't qualify her for benefits. And so she gets nothing. If she had not taken that job, or any job, she could have gotten unemployment for 2 years, for 24 months. Instead, nothing. This is bogus. She worked her whole life. Why isn't she getting benefits? Looking at the terrible job numbers, some liberals are calling for more stimulus. A mistake. What we need now is not more stimulus, but jobs. Back in the Great Depression, the government directly and massively created jobs. And that's what we need now. We should be calling loudly, screaming, jobs now. On the program today, we'll start off with Bill Shortell of the Connecticut Machinists Union. He'll be talking about Pratt & Whitney, his employer, who's axing 1,000 jobs, sending them overseas, and the fight against it. Also about Shortell's own trip this year to Iraq to talk to Iraqi workers there. And finally, Shortell introduces Dar Jamail. All this took place at the Hope Out Loud festivities in Hartford, Connecticut on September 20th. Dar Jamail is an independent reporter, has been to Iraq many times, and has very important things to say about heroic American soldiers who are refusing to fight in Iraq or in the AfPak wars. After that, we'll hear from Chris Hutchinson talking about the upcoming October 17th anti-war rallies in many cities across the country. And finally, I'll talk about my own unbridled enthusiasm for one of the speakers who will be talking in Boston on October 17th.
I work at Pratt & Whitney, our employers United Technologies. They have whittled down our workforce here in Connecticut from over 20,000 when I started down to less than 4,000 now. And they're at it again. They say they want to close one of our plants in Cheshire and another big operation in East Hartford and lay off 1,000 people. Move the work to southern states and out of the country. Maybe some of you have heard the machinists are putting up a stout struggle. We've been negotiating with them for over a month about this. We've mobilized a considerable amount of pressure from the members of Congress, and the shop floor struggle is just beginning. The company is still hell-bent on moving. We're probably going to have a large demonstration with several other groups like the AT&T workers who are in a similar situation to us, and I invite you all to come along. We'll get word to you through the cut-up mailing list if you guys are on it. Now I'll talk a little bit about my trip to Erbil. Erbil is the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. You wouldn't know there was a war going on in Erbil. Kurdistan has been peaceful for years now, which is why they held the conference there. There were 200 trade unionists, including half a dozen from the United States. It was a very impressive group of people. All the trade unionists in Iraq were there despite the fact that they're not recognized their unions are not recognized. The Saddam Hussein's Executive Order 150, which bans unions in the public sector, is still in force, even through all these years of occupation. But the oil workers in particular have a big presence in the oil fields, and their desires, their actions are part of the reason why Exxon, Texaco doesn't have their grubby mitts on Iraqi oil yet. The unions won't stand for it. They'll strike before they let it happen. In fact, they went out on strike in order to keep the U.S. Army from taking over the oil fields and turning over the work to people from third countries at half the wages. It was very impressive being amongst these sisters and brothers. So we came back to the United States with two missions. One, to help steer the U.S. government in a role to make sure the Iraqi unions have full labor rights like unions all over the world, and also to fight against the privatization of their natural resources. And with this, I'll introduce Dar Jamail. Most of you are here to hear Dar Jamail. Like I said before, I hope those of you out in the fringes will come a little closer so he has some real faces to talk to. This is an internationally known, award-winning journalist who has been to Iraq many times, spent, in fact, as long as 9 months there, getting the real stories that the rest of the media won't cover. He's an independent journalist and a book author.
Decided to go to Iraq back early on in the occupation was probably for a lot of the same reasons that most of you are here today on this beautiful Sunday, and that's that you understand that something's fundamentally wrong with this country. And of course, during the lead up to the invasion of Iraq with George Bush sitting in the office of presidency, it was a lot more obvious and blatant. But like most of you, I was watching the corporate media, the selling of the war. We all remember the weapons of mass destruction that never existed. We all remember the ties to 9/11 that never existed. And we all certainly remember the lies of liberating the Iraqi people. Of course, that never existed either. And now, of course, it's so clear that we all see what this war was about and what this ongoing occupation is about. And now, what is so clear about Afghanistan as well, which is basically the same thing. This is not about finding Osama bin Laden. This is about protecting and taking other countries' natural resources and pipelines for those resources. And I decided to go to Iraq to expose this and really give voice to the Iraqi people that wasn't being shared in the most of the corporate media. And after all that time, I ended up writing a book about it that came out about 2 years ago from right now. And when I started going around on tour for that book, I started meeting folks like some of these folks who are here today, Iraq Veterans Against the War, veterans from Iraq, veterans from Afghanistan. And these folks started coming up and talking to me, and as always happens, as just did again right before I came up here, is I'd meet a veteran. Hi, how are you? Where were you in Iraq? When were you there? And how was it? And, those of us who have been over in war zones, there is this bond that we understand what's happening over there. We understand what it's about. We understand what war and occupation does to human beings. And there's just this instant knowing. And I started talking back 2 years ago from right now. The first guy I met, it was literally 1 week into my book tour. He was Corporal Phil Aliff, a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War.